Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Agodans and our external guests today to Agoda Tech Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we are gearing up for an exciting session ahead. We have a very special panel discussion for an exciting discussion on design system. So our topic today will revolve around design system, and we have brought together our experts from Agoda's product and tech teams to delve into this topic. So first, let me introduce our panelists very quickly. We have Alexander here, our design system lead, and Jeremy, our design white label lead that will be representing product team. And we have Michael, senior software engineer, who will bring his technical expertise to the table. We also have Rushana here, our digital accessibility specialist, who will add a crucial dimension to our discussion. And also our moderator for today is Pom Pyramid, who will guide our discussions. Throughout the session, we will encourage you to engage with us. If you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to share them on the Slido channel provided. You can scan this QR code, or you can enter slido.com and search for event code design system. You can also give a thumbs up to questions that you resonate with. Do submit your questions on Slido only, and we will be addressing them in the latter half of our session. Also, please note that we can only share information that is accessible to the public here. Okay, so without further ado, I'll now hand the stage over to Pom. So please take it away. Pom, you are on mute.
You're muted, Pam.
Right. Good start. Right. So thanks everyone for joining us today. It's been a very exciting moment for us. So like every one of us here in the panel is like someone who's been working with design system a lot, and we like happy to share our learnings, experience like about design system. Right. Throughout the years, we've seen a lot of the like positive impact, and we also experience a lot like from these learnings, and would like to share with you all today. Right. So like I would like to start here with like some general concept of design system before we dive into the discussion. Right. So like some of you might already know about design system, but in general, this concept is the collection of principle and the guidelines for the component and product design, right? So this is a very important concept for a company or brand to maintain consistent look and feel throughout their product, either it will be website or applications, right? And on the practical side, you can look at design system as a toolkit. This is available for designer and also developer, right? So this toolkit will allow us to communicate effectively between design and product, and also in tech. And usually design system provide a toolkit that range from like fundamental element like design language, including like colors, typography, padding, and etc. And also include like a set of reusable components, layout, and like feature templates, right? So like this will allow us to compose into a bigger design for the product. So for today's discussion, we'll hear from different perspectives from the people who are working in design system at Agoda. And I think I would like to start with the first question, right? So what does the design system solve, right? I think, Jeremy, you can take this question.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, design systems solve many things, such as establishing consistency throughout your product suite, reducing maintenance costs across your teams, reducing the risk of redundant work taking place on separate teams. But as a white label lead here at Agoda, my work would be extremely difficult without the use of a design system. Our team here at Agoda has made this work so much easier and allows us to provide a much better product for our partners at a much faster speed than would otherwise be possible without a design system. And what I mean by this is our white label team is able to reuse Agoda components directly and then apply theming on top of that, on top of these components, and make small adjustments as needed by our partners. And this reduces the amount of work that we have to do, and it's a huge benefit to the team and saves us a great deal of time.
Right. Can you give us some example of how it works for white label?
Sure. The way it is now, our design systems team has created a token-based system that allows us to easily swap out elements in our designs, such as colors, spacing, and typography, all within our Figma files. The tokens then get updated, and then the new theming is automatically applied to the components within the design, as well as any new components that we want to drag into that design. Additionally, the new token theme will then get exported directly to our dev team to build out the new experience that we design.
Right. You spoke about the benefits, right? Like, is there any challenge specifically to white labels?
Yes, of course. There's a lot of challenges. While the current setup we have is extremely helpful, it is still mostly a manual process. We are always looking for ways to improve how we're working, and we are currently working closely with our design systems team to bring more automation into the theming process and further simplify and speed up our work. These enhancements are going to have a huge impact on our productivity and allow the team to focus more of our time on innovation at Agoda rather than the theming process itself.
Right. Thanks, Jeremy, for the overview. I think let's move on to the like design system, and I would like to address more specifically on how it works at Agoda on the operation side, right? So, like, how does design system work in Agoda, Alex?
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe we can take a little bit of background first. So basically, when I joined Agoda about 6 years ago, we pretty much had a bunch of random collections of design files and UI components, and we kind of were all doing our own little thing. So if you ever wanted to reuse something, you kind of have to like spend a lot of time to browse different files and try to find something that fits your need, and then also verify whether that actually has been built or not. But at some point, there were a couple of developers who started to code a shared UI library for our website. And so this kind of became our first design system officially, right? And it was led by developers, not by designers. Then later, the same year, actually, around the same time, a team of designers started to work with our iOS and Android engineers to build out the library for our mobile apps. So that was great, good first start. The challenge there was now we had two separate design systems, and they all like worked and looked a little bit different. So as a designer using the design system at that time, I kind of had to learn two different design systems, and I needed to provide different designs as well for each platform that I was designing for. So let's say I was designing something for mobile, I would have to first create the design for iOS, and then I would have to create it again for Android because those components and design language were a bit different, and then all over again for mobile web, all using different libraries, components, etc. So thinking of it, there's quite a lot of time wasted on very repetitive and kind of low value tasks at that time.
Right. I remember that we like back in the day, like when we had to figure out how to support like disparity between the two platforms, right? Three platforms. Yeah. So how does it work today?
Yeah, so we changed it up a little bit since then. So right now we're a centralized team at Agoda where we support all different platforms. So in our team now, we have designers, we have web engineers, iOS and Android engineers, we have a QA, accessibility expert, and we also have a product manager for the team. So with that said, like going from basically having three separate systems into one system is actually a really challenging task. And it's something that we worked really hard on over the last 2 years to achieve. But today, when we design something within our team, what we like to do is to bring in the expertise of each role to understand the constraints and opportunities across all the different platforms, so we can try to find a common denominator when we design. And we try to do that from a very early requirement stage. and then follow through throughout the design process to make sure that the styling is correct, that interactions can be done in a certain way across the platforms, and even things like how we set up and name our properties and values of specific components. We try to align as much as we possibly can across both design and engineering and all the different platforms. So like spending time and diligence of doing all of this really kind of helps us to create a more seamless handoff between the designers and engineers across the teams at Agoda that will be using this system. And you could say in general that our team at Agoda functions more or less like any other Scrum team here at Agoda, but there are two main differences. So the first one being that our product, it caters both to the travelers of Agoda, who are, of course, consuming and using our components when they browse the website or app, but also the coworkers that are using it in our product, design, and engineering teams, right? So that means for us, our goal is not just to provide a good product itself, but actually also to enable our coworkers in those teams to both design and build their products faster and with higher quality.
I see. All right. So I would like to like maybe hear from the different perspective now. Like, how does the benefit of a design system like impact like the people who using design system? I think let's hear from developer perspective, right, Michael?
Yeah, sure. Let me take that one. So I remember when I was working in a regular feature team before joining the design system team, like a very common issue is that you rarely have enough time to think all of the intricate details that we have and require to build the best solutions, right? So sometimes I end up creating my own component for only my team only, whereas it actually can be a reusable component for all of the feature teams across the platforms. That's why the design system is needed. The great thing is about design system, like you are having people that dedicated to design system, is this they can focus on getting all of these details done really well once, and then everyone else can benefit from it. With all of these details available out of the box for free, then feature teams don't need to build the custom solutions as often. But even when they do, we provide foundations that help them to do things faster. This one will enable the feature team developers to concentrate on designing the full page layouts and can shift their focus towards the building the business logic layers. This will help the goal of making consistent UI UX across the pages, as well reducing the maintenance and development cost of the feature teams, which is a good investment for us for the future development in Agoda, proving the point from Jeremy from the earlier sections. Well, that's the benefit from developer perspective. So I'm also curious, how does it work within the design organization itself? Let's hear from the designer perspective. Hand it over to you, Alex.
Sure. Yeah, just one more benefit to add on to that, I think, which is pretty great, is that we can actually maintain, experiment, and improve on the system at scale, right? So we can do one single improvement on a specific component or token, and that can bring a massive benefit to the company with relatively little effort compared to if you had to do that change on 1,000 different places around the product, right? So that's also pretty cool. As I mentioned earlier, having a cross-platform design system means that in most cases, your design can be designed one time. You don't need to do the same feature all over again. And you know that that design language and the component is actually supported and already exists in all the different platforms that you're designing for. And I think these days, product designers add the most value when they are solving problems for our users, right? That's sort of the main task for a modern designer. And by having design system, this kind of enables them to focus more on that problem solving and a bit less on designing the final UI. Another challenge, I think, is that everyone has their own preference on how things should be looking like or how things should work. And that might not be a problem if you work in a smaller startup where you have a few designers who can easily align within each other. But when you have a team of tens or hundreds of designers, this can easily become a pretty big mess. So having a design system to take care of those decisions, sort of centralizing that, can also reduce the risk that we introduce more diverging patterns and inconsistencies to our products. And of course, in the end, that benefits the end users too, because then they can enjoy a more coherent and predictable user experience.
Right. So design system change a lot, like the way we work on both design and developer. Right? I think it's interesting to see how like both design and developer use design system to solve their day-to-day problems, right? I think let's hear from like maybe Michael from the developer perspective. How does the developer use design system as of today?
Well, as an ADS development team, myself, we provide the design system in different languages because we work with the web, Android, and iOS, right? So we also have a couple of different tech stack as well. But we bundle all of this kind of a design system as a framework for each respective platforms and deliver it to the users so that they can use it freely according to the feature requirements. Our teams, of course, we collaborate with the designers and its platform representative to establish the correct guidelines, ensuring consistent designs and functionality alignment across 3 different platforms, so we can have a proper shared, composable, and reusable components. And then once a component is finalized, teams are notified, and then they can seamlessly integrate it within their projects. But it might be possible that the component that is being asked by the feature team is not available during the time of development. If that happens, the feature team can request the specific components by describing their requirements and, of course, providing a Figma link to their project. We have dedicated Slack channel and on-call rotations to address those questions and requests, and we try to respond to them as fast as possible to unblock teams from the developing their features. Our first step after we got that request is try to consult with our design system designers to determine if the component that they are requesting is fit within the design system framework. We have also implemented a tracking dashboard enabling us to prioritize the team's needs and then develop the appropriate component based on the timelines and priority of our team as well. I would love to encourage developer contributions to the design systems so we can collaborate together with us so we can proactively contribute and review our component based on the real life use cases that we are using within Agoda, and then to speed up development time as well. One piece of advice from me is it's crucial for developers to collaborate closely with their own designers and evaluate the feasibility of using design system components before opting for the custom ones. So Alex, how about in design itself?
Yeah, so for designers, we're mostly using Figma, and that's where we provide our different libraries as well. So first off, we have a design language that defines the general look and feel of our products. We also have a UI kit with components and templates that the designers can kind of drag in and drop into their design files. And in addition to that, we provide a pretty extensive icon kit as well, and also other visual assets that designers can use to speed up their work. Along with that, we also provide plenty of guidelines to actually explain how to use the system. And to me, I think that's where a lot of the value of design systems come to play. So if you look at, for example, some of the big open source design systems out there, like Material Design or AntDesign, those are really robust systems, and they support almost everything that you could possibly imagine, right? You can mix and match all kinds of things like colors and fonts and components to get exactly the thing that you want. So naturally, you might ask, okay, if that's the case, why don't we just use one of those systems and call it a day? But the fact is that these systems are so broad and generic that they kind of like don't cater to any specific use case, right? Like you can use it in so many different ways. So it doesn't really help us to know when should I use what and how should I use it. You can pick any color you want. So then we haven't really solved the problem in the end, right? So by having a team dedicated to design systems in the company that also knows exactly how this company runs and the challenges and opportunities that we have as a company, we can make sure that the design system answers to those needs and that it aligns with the company's vision and hopefully help the company to reach that vision faster. So I think that's some of the things that we provide and some of the benefits of investing in that system within the company as well.
I see. So I think for design system, it sounds like it's facilitate a lot of the process in the both design and developer, right? So what kind of tool do you have to provide from to developer and also designer? Like I think Michael, you can start from the developer. What kind of tool we have?
Okay, sure. So, well, we have a lot of interesting tools to work with within the design system itself, and it varies from one tech to another tech. For example, we use Grafana to visualize our adoption metrics and track all different components in the system to give more clarity to the users about where we are right now. And we also adopt a robust testing methodology, so ensuring component compatibility across all platforms through snapshots, interactions, manual, and UI testing as well. We also have a storybooks for the web and playground apps so that everyone can play around with our components and try to integrate it within their own systems. For better visibility, we also have a written documentations like Doxy in iOS to help developers to understand more about the usage of the component, how to use those components, the example of the usage, and the preview of the API that we provided. And of course, the best practices how to do things correctly. Beyond components, actually, we also build the whole design system ecosystems. For example, design tokens and thousands of handful icons, which we have our own mechanisms to transform those tokens into respective interfaces for each platforms. Design tokens itself is actually the interpretations of design language from the designers that is being used by developers. For example, like a border, spacing, radius, icons, color, and which all of these are customized and configurable and we as a design systems have a centralized source of truth and control all of these values before propagating into clients. We also build a CI/CD ecosystems to ensure the stability of our release processes. Since we are growing every day and we have a lot of external contributions, we are consistently collaborating with the external team, like a white label team, as well to refine and enhance the systems in order to assist them better. Then I will hand it over Alex for the tooling and the design system team as well.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys definitely have a lot, a lot of tooling, probably more than we have on the design side. But aside from Figma, obviously, we have, for example, built our own custom plugin in Figma that can help designers to identify mistakes in their handoffs. So, for example, if a designer didn't use the correct color token, or they used something from a legacy library, or maybe they used the wrong border radius or typography, this plugin can help to identify those issues and make them aware of that so they can fix it before they ship it to you guys. Another thing that we are working on right now is a custom tool to manage our design tokens and create new themes, actually. It's a pretty cool tool. We can see like a preview of how the tokens look like, and you can sort of live edit them and update them and drag them around and map them to different values. So that's something really cool that we hope that we can release pretty soon. For documentation, we also are just about to launch a new tool called Gitbook. So this is where basically we'll combine all our documentation that we have today, because quite frankly, today it can be quite a mess to find things. We have documentation in Figma, we have Storybook, sometimes Notion, there's a little bit on Confluence and etc. So I think providing like a searchable documentation tool where we like put everything and all of our knowledge together will also be very helpful. And then finally, like one thing that is easy to forget is Slack. It's obviously not a tool that we built in our team, but it's a pretty crucial tool for us to communicate both within our team and also with all our consumers in the product, IT, and design org. As a matter of fact, we actually have individual Slack channels for every single component and every single token in the entire system. So when you join the design systems team at Agoda, you will be added to like 60 or 70 Slack channels right away, which is quite crazy. But yeah, it might feel very overwhelming, but it kind of helps us to actually have very, very detailed discussions and conversations over time and asynchronous, both within the team and also with partners that we work with overseas or in different countries. So we can kind of get those conversations going and talk as we're building out the components. So I think that has also really helped our team a lot.
Right. Right. So thank you, like all you to sharing from the both developer and designer perspective. I'd like to touch on a different point here. So like for Agoda, recently we start to integrate the accessibility into design system. And I think today we have Rushana here. She's the accessibility specialist working very closely with design system. So Rushana, like, can you talk a bit more about accessibility and why it's important for Agoda?
Yeah, sure, Pam. So, accessibility is all about removing barriers and ensuring equal access is provided for everyone. So, it's basically bringing in inclusivity to the product. So, some of the countries have laws to ensure accessibility is built in. So, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act and the American with Disability Act, which we call as ADA, are two acts which is in the US. they follow it. And similarly, countries like Canada and the European Union, so they also have their own, but also strong legislations to implement accessibility as a fundamental human right. So while some countries have laws and regulations and legislations and all, but many of the countries don't have it. But that doesn't mean they don't work on accessibility or try to build in, accessible products. It's just that they still have the commitment and the need to have the accessible products. It's a social responsibility kind of a thing to ensure that everyone is treated equally, and it brings out inclusivity. So that's what most of the countries actually do. And apart from that, like W3C came up with an internationally recognized set of guidelines, which we call as Web Content Accessibility Guideline. So we, in short, we always use it as WCAG because that's easy. And the first set of guidelines from WCAG was released more than 20 years ago. That was called 1.0, WCAG 1.0. And then the latest one, which we are using at the moment, which is WCAG 2.1. So that was released in 2018. So when we talk about the whole thing of WCAG success criteria and so on, like one main thing to remember is that WCAG usually categorize the success criteria into different levels. So we have three levels, which we call as level A, double A, and triple A. So basically, level A would be certain requirements or conformance that would be considered as minimum for an organization to achieve, whereas a triple A would be the highest level of conformance that would require. So most of the organizations set their internal standard into WCAG 2.1 AA standard, which is most achievable, I would say. If an organization would want to go for a triple A, I would say that would be an organization who is much more mature and already have accessibility built on in their products, and then want to go beyond that. So, as for Agoda, we actually consider accessibility like pretty seriously. So, our teams are making an effort to ensure our products are accessible. So, as we have Agoda's design system, we actually bake accessibility into this design system to ensure that our output, like that we can design and build accessible products like out of the box. So this way, this actually increases efficiency as a consumer. So when I say over here consumer, it would be product teams who is using the design system. So they don't have to worry about the component accessibility itself because it's already there. And personally, I feel like accessibility is one of the best benefit that comes out of a design system if you really like have thought of it on a design system. Yeah.
So sounds like there's a lot of like enforcement and like regulation around accessibility, right? So can all accessibility guidelines be solved by design system?
Oh, when you talk about these success criteria in numbers, so WCAG itself, like the 2.1 AA, it has around 78 criteria. But like if you just take only the AA criteria, it's have around 50. But definitely not everything can be implemented within a design system. So why I say this is some of the accessibility requirements would need like product teams to work on their own, like fully and comply with the requirement, where some would be fulfilled by the design system, but still on top of that they still will have to work on certain things in terms of page level. So there are like accessibility requirements on page levels, like page titles, having a way to skip repetitive content, like we call it bypass blocks, and then defining page structures and regions. So these would be some examples of requirements that cannot be met through a design system, and that would require like product teams to be involved to have the like proper guidelines met, and also the accessibility knowledge, of course, over there. Another example that I would like to bring in is the keyboard navigation. So where, like when I say keyboard navigation, that is users are expected to navigate through the product using their product keyboard. So within the design system, all that we can do is we can have components meet keyboard accessible, like keyboard navigation. We can have interactive state management, and also we can have screen read accessibility also worked on. However, the product teams that are building that feature or the page requires to ensure that the user can actually navigate not only within the component which is already there, but also within the page and the relevant section. So that's something that they will have to work on. So apart from like, keyboard navigation, we also need to consider that users are on both a pointer and touch devices to ensure that, even these are fully functional. Yeah.
I see. So how can we scale accessibility across the entire organization?
Yeah, I think this is like a really good question, because accessibility is not something that like one person could do or one man job, or rather like have a few people only working on it. Like I mentioned before, not all the accessibility requirements would be covered as well within the design system. So in my opinion, training and development is the most, like, we should leverage that, and that would be the most suitable approach to scale accessibility across the organization.
I think it's important to remember that accessibility is not a one-time thing that you can solve and then expect everything to just work after that. Especially if you work in an iterative product team where things are changing a lot over time. Each of those changes is actually a risk that you will take an experience that was accessible and turn it into something that is not accessible anymore. And if you think about this at scale, if you have one person or one particular team that is responsible to solve accessibility, but you have 50 or 100 other teams who are creating inaccessible products, you will likely never be able to catch up and stay accessible, right? So that's why I agree that like education and training and development of our designers and engineers and product managers is definitely the most powerful way that we can ensure accessibility is like on top of the mind of all of us, so that when every day they are designing and building stuff, they know how to do it in an accessible way and they're able to make the right decisions themselves.
So how do you incorporate accessibility into day-to-day work in design system?
Yeah, so like when we build things, there are a couple of ways that we can do it, right? So obviously, like the very first thing, if you work on a design system, is probably to look at the low-hanging fruits, like the design language, or the things we can do within our design language to solve a lot of accessibility issues out of the box. And there could be things like making sure that your color palettes are accessible or that they have a wide enough range to solve for contrast. For example, that text sizes are meeting the minimum requirements, that we don't have these teeny tiny little texts everywhere. So there are plenty of those things that we can sort of provide from a language perspective. And then we can take that and that will really help us to design accessible UI in the day-to-day work later on. Now, when we work on components and patterns, what we try to do again is to really get both developers but also accessibility involved at the early design stage. So we kind of try to maximize the knowledge of each other within the team so we can build the best possible UI. And for this, having Roshana on the team has been like such an invaluable resource for us. She's someone that we can consult throughout the entire design process. So we're able to close any sort of accessibility gaps that we are seeing. So that's really amazing. And I think we have a lot of very detailed, nerdy discussions almost every day and for every component that we build, which, yeah, it really helps us. And I think importantly, like in the long term, like every time we have one of these discussions, that's like a micro learning opportunity, right? Where like Roshana tells us something, we're like, okay, I have to remember to do this. So next component I work on, I will probably not have to ask her again. So it sort of upskills our team as well, so that we also become accessibility experts. Yeah.
Let me add some additional things on top of what Alex mentions in terms of from developer perspective. So once designed and fed with the Roshana, we also have accessibility checks in the code that will pick up certain issues if we somehow missed something, especially for accessibility requirements, right? So we implemented a required accessibility properties in the web component, so the end users can have it by default. But some of those optional properties still rely on the end users to implement that one. Besides that, we have an accessibility CI pipeline to ensure and warn developers if it breaks some accessibility requirements. Other than that, we apply a lot of testing methodologies like automations and exploratory testings to ensure that all of the code actually doesn't break anything. Lastly, we have accessibility expert, so like Rushana, to work with us to verify all of the changes that developers made really comply with the accessibility checklist. That's what I can see from the developer's perspective. So hand it over back to Pom.
Right. Thanks everyone for sharing. Like sounds like accessibility is very important for us and a lot for us to explore on. I think it's very insightful like conversation that we like touch on, like starting from the design system, how it works in Agoda, and then the tooling that we provide, right, and how it impact the day-to-day work. And now we are touching about the design accessibility also, right? So I think like for the next part, we'll take the questions, right? So I think Nan, can you help to share the slide? So I think with the time, I think we'll spend around like maybe 15 minutes to pick some of the questions that kind of on top of the voting queue. Right. Right. What do we have here? So, all right, first question. What is the first step of building design system for a product that is already ongoing, has a bunch of scattered component in different files? Like it's quite overwhelming and would be nice to know where to start. This is actually exactly our situation, I guess. I think Alex, you can touch on that part.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think especially in the early stages of a design system, like something that is pretty important is to kind of like get other people on board to use it. So I would say there's like not a one answer, like you should start with a single component or this or that, but maybe see like where are the biggest pain points in the teams today, like what is causing the most issues and frustrations and time waste, and see if that's something that maybe you can start focusing on and providing that. If you can do that, like you're pretty good, like off to a pretty good start, right? Because people are like, okay, wow, like I was supposed to spend like 3 weeks on doing this and now I got it for free. And then I think people will be more likely to continue using the system, and then you can continue to figure out what is the next most important thing. So maybe try to talk to the, obviously same as any other designer would do, like talk to your users, see where the pain points are and prioritize accordingly. It doesn't have to start with a button. I think a lot of companies do this mistake where like, let's create a button. It's like, what most companies actually have a button already. Like that's maybe not the biggest pain point in their work. So that's something that can come later. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'd like to add a little bit onto that. So like probably start from the principle of your product first, how it like look like, what it mean to be like the product and brand level, and then start to break down from there. Right. So this next question, how to balance between having a centralized design system and having agility for each team to innovate, and like also like how much should small company invest in centralized design system?
Yeah, those like two very like interesting questions, I think. Like maybe I'll start with the like, and anyone else can chime in, of course. But I'll start with the second one. How much should small company invest in a centralized design system? I guess if by centralized you mean like different platforms like we do, like app, Android, iOS, then to be honest, I think you should really carefully consider that, because it's hard. Like it's not easy to get like different platforms into one system and figure that out. So if you're small, and if that's what you mean with the question, and if you're a small company, I would probably not start with that. Centralized as in one team in a company versus like having it sort of like a shared responsibility. That's another good question, really. It kind of depends, I guess, on how big the team is. But if it's a small team, it's very possible, I would say, that you're small enough to be able to align amongst each other and decide together what's important to build and do that. I think the challenges is when you're like becoming really large as an organization, because like having that sort of collaboration and communication doesn't really scale that well. And in those cases, it might be better to have like more of a centralized effort that can focus on it. But that said, the agility part, like having it centralized, having agility for teams to innovate, is a question that I think we talk about, if not every day, but probably every week in our team as well. We have gone through a couple of phases in our design systems team, from being very open, where we say, hey, you can do whatever you want, add anything you want into the system, like it's fine as long as you can move fast. And that was our previous design system. And the result of that was not maybe the best user experience. It was a pretty disjointed experience. And then with the latest version, we kind of started off the other way around. Okay, let's be like very like picky with what we add and how we add it, right? But then maybe we're swinging a little bit too far onto that. And so I think like really have to try and find a good balance where we say, okay, these are the things that we do want to moderate in the system, and these are the areas where we want to leave a lot of room open for the designers and engineers to innovate and dream up their own solution. The last thing we want, which is a really easy to trap, to fall into, is a place where both designers and engineers and product teams feel like discouraged to innovate and come up with new ideas because it's so hard to like push them through. And that's something that we are trying to learn more on as we're working.
Yeah, maybe
anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I can add on top of what Alex comment. Like for me, I think let's try to think design system as a tool, so it can push and help you to get things done faster. But it doesn't mean it blocks your agility or your innovations within your own team, right? Because we can always work together to ensure that the new requirements is important to be added as part of design system or not, right? Even if it is not, and you can always do your own things, but we also have design language to use, like a color, icon, a radius, and so on, with your own custom component. But it has cost as well. It always depends on the team as well. So as a developer perspective, like let's try to think first about the feasibility of using design system. Then from there, then we can try to escalate more things, like dive down more deeper about what we can do to help you, basically. Yeah,
I think like having guidelines and a design language, like those in combination, like you can kind of give that away as a tool to your stakeholder and say, hey, you know what, if you need to build something and we don't have it today, like just take this and run with it. And you know, like we'll come back and have a look at it later if we see that there's potential to sort of level it up to design system kind of standards. So I think that's a pretty good sort of balance where you can be like, okay, you take this and use this for sure. Like don't go completely crazy and then do something custom 100%, but leave some room for that to happen. I think makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Anything else to that? Right. I think we can move to the next question. Do we consider accessibility guideline while designing components? Like, are we AAA or AA compliant?
Yeah, I think I can take that. So yes, I mean, we do consider accessibility guidelines. So when I say accessibility guidelines, that is web content accessibility guidelines. So we actually have the latest guidelines compliant. So our mission is basically to have WCAG 2.1 AA standard achieved. So within design system also, like we when we build up new components, we make sure that it is compliant on WCAG 2.1 AA. And for the existing components, we actually go through them frequently and identify any issues or anything that we have missed, and we try to work on those things to make sure these components are also complied with the particular guideline and the level.
Yeah, I think like to add to that, so like this is a work in progress for us too. We have definitely not like covered 100% of every component just yet. We're working towards it. And another thing, like Agoda is a very data-driven company, right? Like we like to test and experiment with everything that we do on our platforms. So that also means that even we're fixing something or accessibility, we definitely want to run that experiment and see how it performs to catch any potential issues. And what that has allowed us is to see that when we, for example, fix something for accessibility, but it might not perform as well as we had hoped, okay, like what are the things that we can do? What is the root cause of that? Is it like something in the design that could be tweaked and improved in order to create a better experience? or is it maybe how we have used and applied the design system in the product that's like is lacking maybe some user experience? Or is it potentially even that we're having the wrong feature and now we made that feature easier to use and it's causing bad business, right? So I think combination of design systems, accessibility, and experimentation is super interesting. Like we get tons of new learnings every week when we run these experiments and implement accessibility, which is pretty cool.
Right. Next question. How do micro copies work in design system? So like I can take that first part, I think. So like from my understanding, micro copies is like something repetitive inside the design system. And from the experience that we work in Agoda, I think that like one of the example would be let's say a hover state or like a click animation, right? So like those like small part that actually repeat and reuse itself a lot throughout multiple components. For us, we categorize it as like a styling, and like we define only one styling across all the like components, right? So like for web design, hover state on every single component would look the same. And like this is already taking into account the like when we hover, does the color contrast still pass the accessibility contrast ratio that is required? Like how do we like take consistent look and feel across multiple platform like iOS, Android, and website? So it's I think like zooming out a little bit and then also like try to define how it in general it looked like, and like defining what's the behavior of each of the like interaction. Anything is anyone want to add? Yeah,
All good.
I think yeah, then I think we can move on. So how to get business to buy into design system when the business direction is more focused on other things. Even the business brought design system, but can't afford to have dedicated team to build it. Any suggestions?
Jeremy, do you have something, or do you want me to try and elaborate? You have worked in a pretty successful design system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's worthwhile kind of evaluating what the culture of the company that you're working with and how it relates to the culture of working with the design system. And there may not be an alignment there. There are options. There are a lot of open source design systems that you might want to start with if the company isn't willing to invest in them. But really, it's all about telling the right story. What are the benefits that you're going to see? And you know, we've spent this entire session talking about a lot of those things, and the efficiencies that you get within your team. So there's really no reason that somebody wouldn't want to adopt it, understanding that, because the business benefits are going to be there. There's no question about that. But I think understanding how the culture of the company and how it's different from a more open, collaborative culture that is kind of supporting design systems, that might help you recognize where that conversation is misaligned and maybe find some common ground. Just understanding where you are on that kind of mapping in those differences.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely start very small, right? Like, let's define, you know, like which font are we going to use? Can we establish a type hierarchy? Maybe that's like a first good step that doesn't really require a lot of like time and money for a company. Like it's something that anyone can sort of start picking up and work together with a team and do maybe a little bit more of sort of skunkworks design system, like getting some quick and dirty things up there and move forward slowly. It doesn't have to be, let's ask for like $1 million budget the first thing we do before we have proven anything. Like getting some quick wins to prove it first and to get people sort of on board with it might also help you later on when you need to get that budget or need to get that dedicated team. And like Jeremy said, like, how do you tell the story? Like, I think like one thing that I think we learned in our team, like looking back maybe a year ago or so, the way we sort of also measured our design system and the adoption of the system. Starting off, we kind of looked at like what's the adoption across the entire code base, and we're like, oh wow, it's really low. The number is really low, and we're looking, okay, like over time, like how do we manage to sort of bump that number up? And we saw that, okay.
Right. Something happened. All right. I think with that, I think we can move to the next question, I think. All right. So how can we adopt design system incrementally if we have existing product which doesn't follow the design language, right? Any adoption can look out of place and like unless we do a big bang adoption.
I can jump in here. I have a lot of experience with this particular problem. It's very common to be in this situation where you have existing products that came about at different phases and different stages that may or may not have incorporated design systems. So it's a challenging question, and I think you have to take it kind of on a case-by-case situation. I've recently gone through this with a product suite that I was overseeing, and what we decided to do is attack it on two different levels. So we made some global changes, adopting all of our products so that they aligned with the new design system, at least visually within the UI. And then we slowly started focusing on new features and rolling the new design system into the design. It can obviously get messy, and that's why you have to just kind of evaluate each situation. But I think with those global changes, it helped it feel still consistent and like a family of products, where the smaller details were less noticeable or less interfering with the experience that the users were going to have. But it's a great question. I don't have a great answer. I think that's the end of what I have to say about that.
We cannot hear you, Alex. All right, so
Maybe now. Do you hear me, or is it still?
Yes.
Okay,
now.
sorry about that.
There we go.
Perfect time with batteries dying. Anywho, no, like on the question that Jeremy was talking about, like I think sometimes like maybe you have a collection of components in close proximity, like you have a couple of badges next to each other or a couple of buttons next to each other. Maybe if it's possible to like migrate like that chunk of things, but not the entire page, at least that will help to solve the most glaring issues. Like you wouldn't want to migrate like this button and then leave the other button that looks completely different right next to it. Like that would probably not be the best way to go. But if you can find certain areas within the product or certain components and maybe take it from there, like that might be another strategy. Yeah.
Right. I think we can move on to the next question. Probably the last one, then I think like otherwise we'll run out of time. Right. So first of all, I'm working on the like design system for a large company. How can I make a design system that I'm going to do so that it can align with the old system like that hasn't already been done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, first of all, you probably need to decide, is that what you want? Are you looking to replicate what you had before? Is it like a technical reason that you're rebuilding it, but you're happy with the design? Or are you actually taking this opportunity to sort of revamp and reimagine the product? I think like, at least for us, like we're more on the second part there. Like we've been taking the opportunity to both sort of revamp the tech stack, but also to reimagine the look and feel of the product. So in that case, I'm not sure if that's kind of the goal, right? But if you want to do that, yeah, I'm not sure like if the question is more on the design side or I guess so, but yeah, I feel like if that's what you want to do, like probably a bit more straightforward than if you want to have to do like the entire redesign of it. But I don't know, anyone has any thoughts on this?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to say, I agree with Alex. I'm not sure why you would want to do that. So maybe understanding that, we'd have a better answer. But from my perspective, every time you have an opportunity to build a new design system from an old one or replacing an old one, take time to learn from your experience using the old system and make those improvements. It's an opportunity to make improvements in the design system. I would never pass that up, because it's a wonderful thing, because you learn so much about what works and what doesn't work when you build design systems.
Yeah, I like from my point of view, I think not only the design and historical like in the past of your product, but maybe consider about the technical like tech stack that you using right now too, right? Like, is there any like change into those tech stack, and like how would the migration and rollout work? Right, so these two factors will actually like very important for design system, how it will be adopted in the futures, and like eventually I think the goal is to have only one design system across the entire product, right? All right, I think we run out of time, so like I would like to thank you everyone for like tuning in and then joining us today. So like one last request from me is to like share with us the feedback. We would like to hear from you, and we would like to take all the feedback and then improve our next session. Right. It's been a very good discussion, and I appreciate all the questions that you guys raised. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
think
everyone, for a very interesting and useful discussion. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in as well. Before we end, I'd like to ask for a favor. We have a quick poll, just so that we understand how you feel about this TikTok. Please answer this poll for us. Your feedback is very valuable. Thank you so much. So that is a wrap for today. Thank you for attending, and please look forward to our next TikTok. See you.